Chapter 1, The Wind of Panic, The Ethics of Collective Fear. Smell the sulfur and feel the beating of heavy wings against the humid heat of the Zanzibar night. The number 1 represents the singularity of terror. I am the Popobawa, whose name means bat wing in Swahili. I am not an ancient forest spirit, but a modern manifestation, a shetani spirit, that feeds on panic and vulnerability. I am a one-eyed being with sharp claws and a mutable form that defies logic. The initial ethical conflict is terror versus reason. Unlike the Ukiana, who brings poetic silence, I bring chaos. I attack people in their own homes, in their most intimate moments of sleep. My presence is not a force of nature, but a force of social psychology. The ethics of the Popobawa teach that when fear becomes collective, reality bends to accommodate the monster. The origin: I emerged in full force in the 1970s, during times of political tension. A people's fear often materializes in a creature that can be blamed for the pain. The dilemma: is it more ethical to confront the external monster or to admit that true panic stems from the instability of a human system? I am the eye that sees what you try to hide under the sheets, I whisper, as the shadow of my wings covers your window. The ethics of Popobawa teach: fear is a virus. It doesn't need a physical cause to be real, it only needs you to believe I'm in the next house. In my kingdom, doubt is the door I never need to break down. I teach that panic is an invisible infrastructure that sustains the power of the shadow. Chapter 2, The Attack in the Dark, The Ethics of Violated Privacy. Feel the cold sweat and the weight of a presence that shouldn't be there, in the place where you feel safest. The number 2 represents invasion and duality. The Popobawa doesn't attack in open fields or distant forests, it attacks in domestic space. It crosses locked walls and materializes at the foot of the bed. Its aggression is not just physical, it is a profound violation of dignity and personal sanctuary. The ethical conflict here is security versus vulnerability. In Zanzibar, the Popobawa panic often leads people to sleep outside their homes, in large groups around campfires. They abandon the privacy of the walls to seek the safety of the crowd. The ethics of the attack in the dark teaches that the first thing a system of fear destroys is not the body, but the trust in the infrastructure that protects us, the house, the family, the locked door. The target: he chooses the silence of the room to sow the noise of trauma. The dilemma: what remains of a society when its most intimate refuge becomes the place of greatest danger? I don't need keys when I possess your nightmares, I whisper, while the moonlight draws the shadow of a wing on the wall. The ethics of invasion teaches: true security is an illusion we maintain to be able to sleep. I am the reminder that no physical barrier is absolute when the mind is already surrendered. I transform your home into a hunting ground. The dilemma is endpoint integrity. The myth: Popobawa victims are often urged to recount what happened. If they remain silent, it returns. The virus demands to be transmitted through recounting to remain alive in the social fabric. The ethics: in your IT field, Popobawa is like a zero-day exploit. He exploits a vulnerability that no one knew existed, bypassing all firewalls, doors and windows. The only defense in Zanzibar is collective security, taking the data off the isolated server and putting it on the public network, sleeping on the street. I teach that privacy is a luxury that fear does not allow. Chapter 3, Exposure and Stigma, The Ethics of the Victim. Feel the weight of the stares of an entire village at dawn. The number 3 represents communication and social pressure. The Popobawa is a master of psychological blackmail. He often demands that his victims tell everyone about the attack. If the victim tries to hide the trauma out of shame, he promises to return the following night, and the next, until the secret is broken. The ethical conflict here is vulnerability versus reputation. In many cultures, admitting to being the target of such an intimate and bizarre attack generates a deep social stigma. The Popobawa uses shame as fuel. He transforms private suffering into a public spectacle. The ethics of exposure teaches that the monster doesn't just want your energy, he wants you to become the vector for transmitting fear to the rest of the system. The condition: tell everyone, or I won't leave. The dilemma: is it better to protect your individual honor and continue suffering, or sacrifice your privacy to alert and frighten the collective? I feed on your voice as much as on your silence, I whisper, as I disappear into the sunlight. The ethics of exposure teaches: trauma is a system that seeks to replicate itself. When you speak, you free yourself from me, but plant the seed of fear in the heart of your neighbor. I am not just a creature, I am the conversation that never stops circulating. The dilemma is vulnerability disclosure. The myth: Popobawa is one of the rare creatures that forces its own publicity. It doesn't want to be a forgotten myth, it wants to be the main topic of the newspaper and radio. The ethics: in its technical area, Popobawa represents ransomware. It invades the system, kidnaps peace or data, and demands something in return. In its case, the payment is the public exposure of the security flaw. The victim is caught in a dilemma between corporate silence, hiding the intrusion, and the duty to report so that others can protect themselves. I teach that the truth can be your cure, but it can also be your neighbor's virus. Chapter 4, The All-Seeing Eye, The Vigilance of Fear. Feel the sting in the back of your neck, that shiver that warns you, you are not alone, even in the darkest room. The number 4 represents the structure of observation. The Popobawa has only one enormous eye in the center of its bat-like face. It doesn't need peripheral vision, it has absolute focus. It doesn't look at you, it looks through you, mapping your weaknesses, your guilt, and your secrets. The ethical conflict here is vigilance versus freedom. The Popobawa is the archetype of the panopticon, the feeling that there is an invisible sentinel monitoring every movement. In Zanzibar, the fear of the Popobawa's eye alters the behavior of entire villages. People stop acting spontaneously and begin to act according to the expectations of the vigilante. The one-eye ethics teaches that the most effective control is not that which shackles the wrists, but that which makes you believe you are being watched 24 hours a day. The gaze, it is a dehumanizing focus, transforming the person into an object of study or hunting. The dilemma, how to maintain the integrity of the self when living under the shadow of a constant and punitive monitoring system. I don't blink, because your doubt is my entertainment, I whisper, while your pupil contracts with your heartbeat. The ethics of surveillance teaches, whoever feels observed is never truly free. I am the administrator who never logs off. I don't need to be in every house at the same time, I only need you to behave as if I were. The dilemma is monitoring and telemetry. The myth, Popobawa, is often associated with periods of social or political change. It arises when the eye of the state or society becomes heavy and invasive. Ethics, in the IT and infrastructure field, Popobawa represents spyware, or an intrusive monitoring system that collects data without clear consent. It's the big brother of the network. It knows when the system is idle, when you sleep, and attacks precisely at the point of least resistance. I teach that the monster's eye only has power over those who believe they have nowhere to hide. Chapter 5, The Symptom of Chaos, The Ethics of Collective Manifestation. Feel the air vibrate with the tension of 1,000 whispers in a crowded market. The number 5 represents instability and change. The Popobawa is not an entity that lives isolated in a cave, it is a network phenomenon. It emerges in full force during times of political transition, economic crises, or abrupt social changes in Tanzania. It is the physical translation of an anxiety that society cannot name. The ethical conflict here is cause versus effect. The ethics of collective manifestation suggests that the Popobawa is a discharge mechanism for social stress. When people feel powerless in the face of greater forces, the government, the economy, the future, the collective mind creates an enemy that they can, at least, try to combat with bonfires and vigils. The monster is the symptom, not the disease. The outbreak, the Popobawa does not attack a person, he attacks an entire island at once, saturating the bandwidth of public attention. The dilemma, is it easier for a community to believe in a demon with bat wings than to admit that its social structure is collapsing? I am the form your panic takes when it tires of being just a feeling, I whisper, blending into the radio noise. The symptom ethics teaches, where there's smoke of sulfur, there's fire of uncertainty. I am the error that appears on the screen when society's processor overheats. You hunt me with spears, but you should hunt me with stability and peace. The dilemma is buffer overflow. The myth, Popobawa disappears as suddenly as it appears, as soon as social tension decreases or the community finds a new way to deal with its problems. The ethics, in its technical view, Popobawa is an emotional denial of service, DDoS, attack. It floods the system with so many packets of fear that normal life functions, work, sleep, commerce, cease to function. It is the result of a system that lacks filtering mechanisms for accumulated stress. I teach that a monster born from everyone's mind can only be defeated by everyone's effort. Chapter 6, The Anatomy of the Shadow, The Ethics of Mutation. Feel the form under your hands change like melting wax or dense smoke. The number 6 represents adaptability and fluidity. The Popobawa does not possess a fixed and immutable physical form. Although its classic representation is that of a cyclops bat, it is a master of transmutation. It can be an ordinary man walking down the street, a domestic animal, or an indistinguishable shadow in the corner of a room. The ethical conflict here is essence versus appearance. The ethics of mutation teaches that the deepest danger is not the one that shows itself with claws and fangs, but the one that camouflages itself in normality. By changing form, the Popobawa destroys the basis of social trust. If the monster can be anyone, then anyone can be the monster. Suspicion becomes the standard operating system of the community. The disguise, it doesn't just hide in the shadows, he hides in plain sight, using familiarity as a shield. The dilemma, how to protect a society when the enemy uses the very face of society to infiltrate. I am the face you greet at the market and the nightmare you lock outside, I whisper, as my skin takes on the texture of air. The ethics of mutation teaches, form is just an interface. What matters is the code running underneath. I change so you never learn to detect me. I am the chameleon of panic. The dilemma is malware polymorphism. The myth, reports from Zanzibar describe Popobawa assuming human forms to ask for information or simply observe its victims during the day, before the nightly attack. It is an active reconnaissance, recon, process. The ethics, in its infrastructure and security context, Popobawa represents the polymorphic virus. It changes its digital signature with each replication to avoid detection by pattern-based antivirus software. It requires behavioral analysis, heuristics, not just a search for specific photos or files. I teach that what constantly changes its face can only be recognized by the scars it leaves on the system. Chapter 7, The Collective Antidote, The Ethics of Group Resistance. Feel the warmth of the bonfires and the murmur of dozens of voices refusing to be silenced. The number 7 represents collective analysis and network protection. When the Popobawa panic reaches its peak, Zanzibar's response is radical, the dissolution of individuality. Families abandon their isolated rooms and gather in large groups in the streets. They create a distributed system of human surveillance where no one sleeps alone. The ethical conflict here is collective security versus individual autonomy. The ethics of group resistance teaches that the monster thrives in isolation. By sleeping in the street, the community admits its vulnerability but gains strength through mutual observation. If the Popobawa attacks in the dark and in secret, the light of the bonfires and the witness of many eyes paralyze it. The antidote is not a physical weapon, but the refusal to be an isolated victim. The strategy, constant monitoring. While some sleep, others keep watch. The network never goes offline. The dilemma, how far would you sacrifice your comfort and privacy to ensure the system, the village, remains intact? I am the wolf that fears the pack that never sleeps, I whisper, observing the glow of the embers from the top of the palm trees. The ethics of the antidote teach, the strength of a system is not in the thickness of its walls, but in the connectivity of its nodes. When you unite, you create a firewall that I cannot cross. My power ends where your solidarity begins. The dilemma is high availability and redundancy. The myth, the Popobawa rarely attacks large groups. It is a predator of single points of failure. If it cannot isolate a target, it loses access. The ethics, in your IT infrastructure, the collective antidote represents the failover cluster. If a server, a person, goes down or is attacked, the other members of the cluster take over the load and keep the service running. Zanzibar security is based on human redundancy. If one blinks, the other sees. I teach that unity doesn't erase fear, but it makes it manageable. Chapter 8, Rumor as Code, The Ethics of Information. Feel the vibration in the air as a story is passed from mouth to mouth at the market, gaining weight and form with each repetition. The number 8 represents structure and transmission. The Popobawa is not just meat and wing, it is viral information. It travels through radio waves, SMS messages, and sidewalk conversations. In Zanzibar, it is the fastest data packet on the social network. The ethical conflict here is objective truth versus functional belief. The ethics of rumor as code teaches that, in a system under stress, the distinction between what happened and what they say happened disappears. If everyone believes the Popobawa is attacking, businesses close, schools stop, and behavior changes. The rumor becomes the city's operating system. The monster doesn't need to physically exist to exert power, it only needs to be processed in the collective mind. The vector, speech. Each person who tells the story adds a bit of realism and terror. The dilemma, how to interrupt a chain of misinformation when the very act of denying ends up spreading the monster's name even further. I am the echo you mistake for a scream, I whisper, while news of my attack crosses the ocean in seconds. The ethics of information teaches, in the connected world, perception is the only reality that matters. I am the malicious code that lodges itself in your curiosity. The more you talk about me, the more I occupy your mental bandwidth. The dilemma is the propagation of malware and social engineering. The myth, Popobawa is a phenomenon of mass hysteria, documented by doctors and sociologists. It is an idea that behaves like a biological organism, seeking hosts, minds, to replicate itself. The ethics, in its area of infrastructure, Popobawa represents the worm. Unlike a simple virus, a worm doesn't need a host file, it propagates itself through network vulnerabilities, fear and gossip. To stop it, simply cleaning a machine isn't enough, you need to isolate the network and filter outgoing traffic. I teach that a lie that everyone believes functions exactly like a truth. Chapter 9, The Shadow of Modernity, the Ethics of Urban Evolution. Feel the static hum of a power transformer and the bluish glow of cell phone screens in the dark. The number 9 represents accumulation and transition. The Popobawa didn't stay confined to rural folklore, it moved to the city. It no longer inhabits only the tops of baobab trees, it now glides between fiber optic cables and manifests itself in online forums and instant messaging groups in Zanzibar and Dar es Salaam. The ethical conflict here is technology versus atavism. The ethics of the shadow of modernity teaches that technological progress does not erase primal fear, it merely provides it with new interfaces. The modern Popobawa is a ghost in the machine. It uses the speed of information to saturate the urban environment even before it materializes. Modernity has given us tools to monitor the world, but it has also given the monster tools to monitor us back. The evolution, he no longer needs to fly miles, he travels at the speed of a click. The dilemma, has technology made us safer or just more efficient at spreading our own panic? I don't fear your electricity, for I am the short circuit of your soul, I whisper, as your Wi-Fi signal flickers in my presence. The ethics of modernity teach, the more complex the system, the more places I have to hide. I am the glitch you can't explain, the corrupted data that whispers my name in the middle of the code. The dilemma is the attack surface. The myth, unlike spirits that fear electric light, the modern Popobawa seems to feed on urban anxiety. It is the persistent noise in a society that never sleeps and is always connected. The ethics, in its view of IT infrastructure and governance, the Popobawa represents the vulnerability in legacy systems that try to run in modern environments. It is the error that arises when ancestral fear, old hardware, meets the speed of the current network. The attack surface has increased, now the monster can enter through the door, the window, or the notification on your smartphone. I teach that a connected world is a world where no monster dies for lack of an audience. Chapter 10, The Mirror of Fear, the Integration of the Shadow. Feel the absolute silence that precedes dawn, that moment when the last bonfire goes out and the sunlight begins to dissolve the sulfur. The number 10 represents totality and the complete cycle. The Popobawa is not destroyed with weapons, nor expelled by prayers, it simply retreats when society processes its fear and regains stability. It is the shadow that only exists as long as there is bright light and solid objects to block it. The final ethical conflict is projection versus reality. The ethics of shadow integration teaches that the Popobawa is, ultimately, our own reflection in a moment of crisis. It is the I that judges us when we feel guilty, the wing that suffocates us when we feel trapped, and the invasion we fear when we lose control over our lives. Accepting the existence of the monster is accepting that the human psyche has layers that modern logic has not yet mapped. The lesson, the monster doesn't come to kill the body, but to test the resilience of the collective soul. The dilemma, do you prefer to believe in an external demon that can be avoided with bonfires, or accept that the Popobawa is an inherent function of the architecture of the human mind under pressure? I am the version of you that appears when the system crashes, my voice is now only the rustling of palm leaves. The ethics of integration teaches, fear is not a system error, it is a warning that the system is alive. I disappear now, not because you defeated me, but because you stopped feeding me your panic. I am the shadow that ensures you still value the light. The dilemma is the audit log and the postmortem. The myth, the Popobawa enters periods of hibernation that last for years or decades, returning only when the conditions of social, temperature and pressure are ideal. It is a cyclical event. Ethics, in your infrastructure universe, Popobawa is the critical incident. After the system is back online, you do the postmortem. What did we learn? How did the malware get in? The answer in Zanzibar is always the same. The monster entered through our own disunity and left when we became one again. I teach that knowing your monster is the only way to ensure it never needs to knock on your door again. Tomorrow. The sun shines over the Indian Ocean and the people of Zanzibar return to their homes, locking their doors with a new understanding. Popobawa is now just a long shadow in memory. The journey through the Zanzibar panic has ended. To which new coordinate of the world does your quest for knowledge now lean?